I stood at the kitchen counter, my hands pressed against the cold granite, feeling the weight of the room pressing in on me. My 16-year-old daughter, Jade, was slumped at the table, her arms crossed tightly, eyes fixed on some distant point outside the window. The air between us was thick, suffocating. Outside, the world was moving on, but in this house, nothing felt like it was moving at all. Margot and her new husband were expecting Jade to handle all the housework, something she finally refused to do. I wanted to help, I wanted to fix this, but how? I wasn't sure who to blame anymore. Maybe it was me for not seeing this coming. Maybe it was Jade for being caught in the middle of a battle she didn't ask for. Or maybe it was Margot, my ex-wife, for creating a reality where everything always felt like it was on my shoulders, and now, even Jade's too. I leaned back against the counter, my eyes drifting to the photo on the wall of when we used to be a family, before all of this. Back when Margot and I were young, bright-eyed, and full of hope. Before everything felt like a constant argument, a never-ending string of complaints and misunderstandings. I remember when we met. I was 21, just out of college, fresh-faced, eager. Margot was 19, with this radiant intelligence that drew me in immediately. She was funny, smart, and, let's be honest, stunning. I asked her out the first day we met. No hesitation. She said yes, and just like that, we were inseparable. But looking back now, I can see how it all went wrong, how the decisions we made, choices that were supposed to bring us closer, ended up pulling us apart. It was Margot's decision to keep the baby. Not that I had a problem with it. I wasn't going to tell her what to do with her body. But when she told me, there was this glimmer in her eyes. She was excited, sure, but was I? I wanted to be, I tried to be, but the weight of it all, the responsibility, the fear, it crushed me. I was 24, working a steady job, but just scraping by. I had a good salary, but not enough for childcare. And Margot, she had just graduated. She was smart. Capable. She could have had a career, a future. But I didn't force her to go after it. I let her choose. She chose to stay home, to raise our daughter while I worked. I could see how that hurt her, though. She resented me for it. Resented me for letting her give up her career dreams for a life she didn't fully want. At first, I told myself she'd be okay, that it was just the hormones, that the depression would pass. But it didn't. The tension in our house began to build, inch by painful inch. She was mad all the time. I remember those early months. I'd come home from work, already drained, and she'd be waiting for me with a scowl. It didn't matter what I did, how much I tried to make her smile, nothing worked. It felt like every conversation turned into a battle. I'd get home, and she'd be angry. It could be something as trivial as a dish left on the counter, or the way I didn't fold the laundry properly. But then the fights grew. The anger wasn't just about the small things anymore. It was about everything. "You don't appreciate me," she'd snap, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "You never have." I remember the first time she said it, my chest tightened in that moment. I couldn't understand it. I worked hard to show her I appreciated her. I'd surprise her with dinners, take her out to nice places because I knew she loved that. I even threw a surprise party for our anniversary, thinking it might help her see that I cared. But nothing worked. "You think these flowers make up for everything?" She'd sneer, looking at the bouquet I had given her. "You think this is enough to make me feel better?" I stood there, fighting the urge to lash out, to scream that I was the one who felt unappreciated. That I was the one slaving away, trying to make a life for us while she sat there, silent, distant, angry. And yet, no matter how many times I tried to make it better, she'd push me away. It was like I couldn't win. And deep down, I knew it was all piling up, her anger, her resentment. But there was no way to get through to her. "I'm doing my best," I said once, my voice barely above a whisper, desperate for her to see reason. "I'm working, I'm trying to make a life for us." She looked at me, eyes cold, distant. "If you were really trying, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess." The words stung, but they weren't new. They were just a fresh layer of the same wounds we'd been reopening for years. And Jade, poor Jade, caught between us. She was only a kid, but she could feel the tension. I could see it in her eyes. The silent pleading for things to go back to normal. It was then I realized nothing was going to go back. I took a deep breath, running a hand through my hair, and glanced at Jade. She was still silent, staring out the window. "I'm sorry, Jade," I murmured. The words felt hollow, even though I meant them. "I wish I could fix it." Jade turned her head, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and pain. "You can't fix everything, Dad." Her words cut deeper than I expected. They weren't just about the housework. They were about the shattered pieces of the family we used to be, the wreckage that Margot and I had left in our wake. But as I stood there, unsure of what to do, the weight of it all pressed down on me. It wasn't just about trying to fix things anymore. It was about understanding that some things can't be fixed. And that realization, the pain that came with it, was a harder pill to swallow than anything else. The regret gnawed at me, an ever-present ache that seemed to intensify the longer I stayed in this charade of a marriage. I'd asked myself over and over how I'd ended up here, why I'd let myself get swept into the whirlwind of promises and compromises that never seemed to add up. Margot had always seemed so sure of herself, of our life together. But as the years went on, every fight, every disagreement, felt like it chipped away at something I could never rebuild. When we argued, it was always the same. She'd raise her voice, tell me how much she'd given up, her career, her dreams, just to raise our daughter, Jade. And what had I done? Promised to support her. That's it. I had to be the silent, understanding partner who swallowed my frustration, even when I knew it wasn't healthy. But that wasn't support, was it? That was me turning into a doormat. And yet, I still kept my mouth shut, year after year, because the last thing I wanted was to make Jade suffer. The fights grew more vicious over time. The words we threw at each other became sharper, more bitter. By the time Jade turned 5, I knew I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't stand the endless silence that filled the spaces between us, or the way every conversation felt like a battlefield. Our marriage was a war zone, and Jade deserved better than that. I had always believed that, one day, Margot and I would find our way back to the way we were, but now that seemed like a sick joke. I'd lost all hope. And so, one evening, with Jade at my parents' house for the weekend, I decided it was time to have the conversation. The one that could finally end everything. I could feel my heart pounding as I walked into the living room, the air thick with the tension I'd been breathing in for years. I tried to stay calm, tried to keep my voice steady. But the words came out more like a confession. "Margot, this isn't working. I don't think we're giving Jade the life she deserves. We need to think about divorce." Her reaction wasn't what I expected. She didn't get angry. She didn't yell. Instead, she just stared at me for a moment, almost as if she were waiting for me to say something else. And then, in the most casual tone, as though she were discussing the weather, she dropped the bomb. "I've been having an affair," she said flatly. "With a guy from your work. You know, the one I met at that party?" The air seemed to drain from the room. I stood there, my mind spinning as I processed the words. Of course, I'd never seen it coming, not like this. But part of me, deep down, buried under all the hurt and disappointment, felt a strange kind of relief. At least now, I didn't have to keep pretending I could make this work. "You're telling me this now?" I whispered, my voice almost a sigh. She nodded, eyes not meeting mine. "I'm sorry. But it doesn't change anything. You were right. We're better off apart." I should have felt more anger, but instead, it was as though a weight lifted off my chest. We were already done. This was just the paperwork. When the divorce came through, it was swift. No drama. No endless legal battles. I took almost everything, my dignity, at least what was left of it, intact. Margot didn't fight it. She knew she couldn't. What could she possibly argue when the truth was plastered across the walls? The one thing she put up a fight for, though, was Jade. She wasn't about to let me take her daughter away, not completely. So, we hashed out a custody arrangement, and in the end, she fought hard for more time with Jade. I wanted 3/4 of the month, but Margot wasn't having it. I wasn't about to turn this into some petty battle. So, I gave in. It was painful, sure. But not because I felt any particular need to make Margot pay. No, it was because I didn't want Jade to grow up hating me. I couldn't risk that. I wasn't going to be the villain in this story. Over the years, things settled into a routine. Co-parenting. It wasn't perfect, but it was manageable. I didn't have to walk on eggshells around Margot anymore. I could finally breathe. I even quit my job, started my own business, something I'd always dreamed of doing but never had the courage to act on. Every decision I made after the divorce felt like a small act of rebellion against the years of suffocating silence. But then, one day, Margot shocked me. She sent me a message, one that made my stomach drop. She was pregnant again. A second child, at her age? I thought about it for a while. It seemed risky, sure, but who was I to say anything? I congratulated her. I did. What else was there to say? But then, something changed. Jade started acting differently. She was exhausted all the time. More withdrawn. I noticed it right away. The sparkle in her eyes that used to be there was gone, replaced with a dull, exhausted look. And when I asked her what was wrong, she lied. She told me everything was fine. But I knew it wasn't. It wasn't until a few months later that Jade finally opened up. Her voice trembled as she told me what was really going on. "Dad," she said, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mom and Shane, they make me clean the house. Every day. After school. I'm always working, Dad. I can't keep up." I felt my heart break. How could Margot do this to her? To Jade, the girl she fought so hard for in the divorce? "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, trying to hide the anger, the hurt. "I didn't want you to worry," Jade whispered, barely above a breath. "I don't want to make things worse. But I can't take it anymore." I pulled her into a hug, my arms trembling. All those years of trying to keep it together, to be the better person, to protect Jade, and here we were. This was the legacy Margot had built for our daughter. The weight of that realization hit me harder than anything she'd ever done to me. And now? Now I had to figure out how to fix it. How to protect Jade from the mess her mother had created. But for once, I wasn't going to be the one to sweep it under the rug. This time, I was going to fight for my daughter. All of her. The weight of the house always seemed to rest on Jade's shoulders, a constant, unspoken burden that no one ever acknowledged. As soon as she stepped through the door, the demand for her to cook would hit like a tidal wave, immediately followed by the relentless order to clean. No one ever cared that they lived like pigs when she wasn't there, leaving the place a mess for weeks, content to let the dust settle until she returned. Then, they'd unload all the chores onto her, expecting her to perform without protest. The problem was, whenever she tried to protest, to say she was tired or didn't have the energy, Margot had this uncanny ability to twist her words. She'd drop the pregnancy card, and that was it. Jade knew better than to argue. The guilt always piled on top of her, drowning her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. "I thought you'd be more understanding this time," Margot would whine, her tone thick with expectation. "When I was pregnant with you, I didn't have this much help. You're the one who's supposed to do it now." Jade felt her stomach turn, the resentment bubbling inside her like a storm trapped in a bottle. It wasn't fair. It wasn't right. But what could she do? Every time she fought back, Shane would just roll his eyes and retreat to his own world, exhausted from work, as though that justified doing absolutely nothing at home. It was maddening, and yet Jade kept her mouth shut. She kept doing the work. She kept smiling, telling herself it would all be worth it if she just held it together a little longer. But the last straw came the day before she left. She could still hear Shane's voice echoing in her head, a cold laugh that made her skin crawl. She had been packing her things in her room, minding her own business, when he casually strolled past, as though he didn't even see her. When he noticed the suitcase, his eyes lingered with that all-too-familiar look of inconvenience. "Why are you packing?" he asked with a smirk, like it didn't matter. "You're going back to your dad's already? For the next 2 weeks, I suppose we'll just live in squalor until you return. Maybe we should hire a housekeeper." "No, wait, why bother when we have you, right?" Jade froze, her hands gripping the suitcase so tightly her knuckles went white. Shane's tone was flippant, like he was making a joke. But the words hit her like daggers. A glorified housemaid, that's what he had called her. It was meant to be a compliment, he claimed. He said she was so good at it, she could make a career out of it, unlike Margot, who was always too tired to lift a finger. "I can't believe he said that to you," I muttered, my hands gripping the phone so hard I feared it might shatter. Jade's voice trembled on the other end of the line. "I'm done, Dad. I'm not going back there. Not after what he said. It's just too much." My heart ached for her, but a fire burned in my chest. The injustice of it all. My daughter, expected to carry the weight of their laziness and disrespect, as though her worth was tied to her ability to serve them. As if she was nothing more than a tool for their comfort. I couldn't let this go. "You need to hear this," I said, my voice shaking with fury as I dialed Margot's number. It took every ounce of self-control not to scream into the phone when she answered. "What's the problem now?" Margot's voice was cold, as if she already knew what was coming. "You're seriously asking me that?" I shot back, disbelief sharp in my words. "Did you hear what Shane said to Jade yesterday? He called her a housemaid. A glorified housemaid. He said she was just good for cleaning and cooking, that's all. And you're just letting it happen. You've encouraged it." There was silence on the other end of the line. A pause. Then, a laugh. A laugh that twisted in my gut, as though she didn't even understand the weight of the situation. "Ah, you're overreacting," she said, as if it was all just some petty squabble. Shane meant it as a joke. He didn't mean anything by it. "A joke?" I spat. "This isn't funny, Margot. This is humiliating. For Jade. For me. You're okay with this? After everything she's done for you? For both of you?" Her voice softened, but there was no remorse. "Oh, you're making it into something it's not. He didn't mean it that way. And honestly, this is how we talk to each other. It's not a big deal." I felt like the world was collapsing in on me. How had she become so numb? How had she lost the ability to see how damaging this was? How you talk to each other. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're a stay-at-home mom now, Margot. I respected the work you did when we were together, but now it's like you've completely lost your sense of self-respect. Do you even care about your daughter anymore?" The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Her voice, when it finally came, was hollow. "You're just trying to make this into something bigger than it is. It's not that serious." I couldn't hold back anymore. "I don't think you're fit to be a mother. You've let him treat her like this for weeks, and now you're just laughing it off. I hope your next child's a son. Maybe you'll know how to raise a real man." I slammed the phone down, my chest heaving with anger and disbelief. I hadn't expected the call to end like that, but the words were out. And they felt like truth, burning hot and sharp. What followed was exactly what I expected. Margot's family rallied around her, crying foul, accusing me of being cruel to a pregnant woman. I didn't care. Jade and I were better off without them. She'd made up her mind. She didn't want to go back. And I would do whatever it took to protect her. I spoke with Jade that night. "You don't have to go back, kiddo. Not if you don't want to. You're staying with me." She nodded, her eyes wide, unsure, but hopeful. "I just don't want to feel like I'm not worth anything." I don't want to be treated like that anymore. I hugged her, tight, determined. I wasn't going to let her slip through my fingers. We were in this together now. The legal battle that followed felt inevitable. Margot's response was venomous, but I was ready. The truth had to come out, and I wasn't going to back down. Not for her. Not for Shane. And certainly not for the twisted version of family they wanted me to accept. When Jade found out that Margot had signed away her parental rights, she seemed distant. Sad, even. But when I reminded her that this was what she wanted, she smiled faintly. It's for the best, Dad. I'm okay. I didn't want her to be okay, not like this. But I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. Finally, we had control of our own lives. I just hoped, more than anything, that I could be the father she deserved. That I could help her rebuild what had been broken. One day at a time. In conclusion, this intense journey of fractured relationships and rising tensions showcases the complexities of familial dynamics when trust, respect, and love are put to the test. It's a poignant reminder that actions, whether born of carelessness or intention, leave lasting impressions on the hearts of those involved. The fight for what's right, even amidst the storm of emotions, underscores the importance of standing firm in protecting one's own and seeking a better path forward. As this chapter closes, it leaves us reflecting on the power of resilience, the courage to confront difficult truths, and the hope that even the most tangled situations can lead to a fresh start.